The Krillian Empire had never known defeat. For 3,000 cycles, they had expanded across the galaxy, world by world, system by system. Their soldiers were engineered for perfection, enhanced bones that could withstand pressures that would crush ordinary beings, reflexes faster than thought, and metabolisms that could process the most toxic atmospheres. Commander Vex stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Dominion, watching the blue-green planet rotate slowly on the view screen. Behind him, his officers worked silently at their stations, confident in their inevitable victory. "Another primitive world," muttered Captain Thorne, reviewing the scans. "Single sapient species. No orbital defenses. No energy shields. They still use chemical propulsion for space travel." Vex nodded, though something nagged at him. The database listed this world as Class 12 Deathworld, the highest rating in Krillian records. But that seemed absurd. They had conquered Varos Prime, where the atmosphere was 90% sulfuric acid. They had subdued frozen Krell, where temperatures never rose above -200 degrees. They had walked the surface of Inferno's Gate, where metal melted under twin suns. This planet, Earth, the natives called it, looked almost pleasant by comparison. "Life readings?" Vex asked. "Abundant," replied the science officer. "Perhaps too abundant. The biodiversity index is off our charts. Millions of species, ranging from microscopic to," she paused, her expression uncertain. "Commander, some of these predators are concerning. Creatures weighing several tons that hunt in packs. Reptiles with bite forces that exceed our battle mech jaws. Microscopic organisms that consume flesh." "Concerning?" Vex laughed. "We survived the razor wasps of Talon 4, creatures that could slice through starship hull plating. Launch the reconnaissance team. I want a full assessment within the day." The landing craft descended through Earth's atmosphere, carrying 50 of the Empire's finest soldiers. They were equipped with plasma rifles, personal shields, and enough firepower to level a city. As they approached the surface, targeting a remote jungle region far from human settlements, Vex watched their vital signs on his command screen. All readings were normal. Strong. Ready. The craft landed in a clearing surrounded by dense vegetation. The rear hatch opened, and the soldiers deployed in perfect formation, scanning the environment with their enhanced senses. "Command, this is Ground Team Alpha," reported Squad Leader Kane. "We've established the perimeter. Temperature is comfortable. Gravity is 0.97 standard, actually easier than home. Oxygen levels are optimal. This is the softest deployment we've ever." The transmission cut to static. Vex leaned forward. "Ground Team Alpha, report." "Kane, respond." Silence. Then screaming. Brief, horrible, and suddenly silent. Every vital sign on Vex's screen flatlined within 30 seconds. 50 of the Empire's best warriors. Gone. For the first time in 3,000 cycles, Commander Vex felt something he'd never experienced before: fear. Commander Vex stared at the dead monitoring screens, his secondary hearts pounding in disbelief. 50 soldiers, warriors who had survived battles across the harshest worlds in the galaxy, eliminated in under a minute. "Launch reconnaissance drones," he ordered, his voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "I want visual on that landing zone immediately." The drones descended rapidly, their cameras feeding high-resolution imagery back to the bridge. What they revealed made the entire command crew fall silent. The landing craft sat undamaged in the clearing. The soldiers' equipment lay scattered around it, plasma rifles, shield generators, all intact and functional. But the soldiers themselves were simply gone. No bodies. No blood. No signs of struggle except for disturbed earth and broken vegetation. "Enhance Sector 7, Vex commanded." The image zoomed in on drag marks leading into the jungle. Deep gouges in the soft earth. And tracks, massive, clawed prints that shouldn't belong to anything on a world with such moderate gravity. What could move that fast? Whispered Captain Thorne. Our soldiers had enhanced reflexes. They could perceive threats in microseconds. The science officer's hands trembled over her console. Commander, I'm detecting significant biological activity around the perimeter. Temperature signatures suggest. I'm reading mammals, reptiles, insects, all moving toward our craft. It's as if, she paused, her face pale. As if they're investigating the intrusion. Send in drones to recover the bodies, Vex ordered. 3 hovering drones moved into the jungle, following the drag marks with their cameras. They traveled less than 50 meters before the video feeds erupted in chaos. Something massive and golden-furred flashed across the screen. A roar that registered on audio sensors as physically painful. Then the feeds went dark. The drones are destroyed, reported the tactical officer. Something crushed them with incredible bite force. Vex reviewed the final frames. He saw amber eyes, fangs the length of daggers, striped fur, and muscle, so much muscle. The creature had weighed perhaps 200 kilograms, yet it moved with impossible speed and precision. A predator, he muttered. Just an animal. Commander, the science officer interrupted, her voice cracking. I'm picking up thousands of similar signatures across the planet. And that's just one species. There are flying predators with 3-meter wingspans. Pack hunters with bite forces exceeding 12,000 newtons. Reptiles that haven't evolved in millions of their years because they're already perfect killing machines. And in the oceans, she stopped, shaking her head. In the oceans, there are creatures the size of our destroyers. Vex pulled up the planet's profile again, reading details he dismissed earlier. Earth's gravity meant creatures here had to develop incredibly efficient muscular systems. The oxygen-rich atmosphere fueled metabolisms that ran hot and fast. Competition among millions of species had created an evolutionary arms race spanning hundreds of millions of years. Every creature here was optimized for survival in an environment that was, itself, trying to kill them. The humans, Vex said slowly. Pull up data on the humans. The screen filled with images of Earth's dominant species. They looked soft. Weak. No natural armor, no claws, no venom. Average height, average weight. They seemed completely unremarkable. How did they survive here? Vex wondered aloud. That's what concerns me, replied the science officer. Commander, these humans aren't the apex predators on this world. They're not even in the top 50. Yet somehow, they conquered this entire planet. They've survived everything this world has thrown at them for millions of years. Vex stared at the images of smiling humans, holding smaller humans in their arms, living in structures that seemed fragile compared to Krillian architecture. What kind of species survives on a world like this without becoming the ultimate predator? Commander Vex decided on a different approach. Instead of landing in remote wilderness, they would make contact with the humans directly. Perhaps these creatures could be reasoned with, could surrender without bloodshed. After all, they were clearly intelligent, they had primitive technology, social structures, and communication systems. The Empire's protocols were clear: offer subjugation or face annihilation. A single diplomatic shuttle descended toward a human settlement, a city called Rio de Janeiro, with millions of inhabitants clustered around a coastal bay. The shuttle's shields could withstand nuclear weapons. Its hull was impenetrable to anything humans possessed. Vex himself led the delegation, along with 10 honor guards in full battle armor. They landed in an open area the humans called Copacabana Beach during daylight hours. Within minutes, hundreds of humans had gathered to stare at the spacecraft. Vex studied them through external cameras before emerging. The humans were even more fragile-looking in person. Thin skin that showed veins underneath. No protective scales or carapace. They wore artificial coverings, clothing, because their bodies couldn't even regulate temperature properly. Children ran among the adults, laughing and pointing, completely unaware of any danger. "They don't look afraid," observed Captain Thorne, standing beside Vex at the hatch. "They don't understand what we are," Vex replied. "Open communications on all frequencies. Translate using the standard first contact protocols." The shuttle speakers boomed across the beach in translated Portuguese, English, and a dozen other human languages. "People of Earth, we are representatives of the Krillian Empire. We have conquered 2,000 worlds. We offer you one choice: submit to imperial rule, or face extinction." Vex waited for panic. For chaos. For the humans to flee or attack or surrender. Instead, they laughed. The crowd on the beach began taking pictures with their primitive devices. Some waved. Children pointed and smiled. Several humans approached the shuttle curiously, as if it were a tourist attraction rather than a harbinger of conquest. "They think it's a show," muttered Thorne. "They don't believe we're real." Frustration rising, Vex activated the shuttle's weapon systems. A pulse of energy shot skyward, visible across the city. The beam punched through the atmosphere into space, bright enough to leave afterimages. The humans stopped laughing. The crowd grew quiet. Some backed away. Others pulled out their communication devices, speaking rapidly. "Better," Vex said. "Open the hatch. We'll make our intentions clear in person." The ramp descended, and Vex strode out in full ceremonial armor, his guards flanking him in perfect formation. He was 3 meters tall, covered in biomechanical plating, with 4 arms and eyes that could see across multiple spectrums. His guards looked even more imposing, living weapons designed to inspire fear. The humans stared. Some screamed. Most simply stood frozen, finally understanding this was real. Vex raised his primary arms in what was meant to be an intimidating gesture. "I am Commander Vex of the Krillian Empire. Your world is now." Something small and brown rushed past his feet. Vex looked down to see a 4-legged creature, furry and compact, with floppy ears and a wagging tail. It jumped up against his armored leg, tongue hanging out, making excited panting sounds. Sorry," a young human male jogged over, attaching a rope to the creature's collar. Sorry. Max gets excited around new people. He won't hurt you, he's friendly." The human pulled the creature away, waving apologetically, seemingly more embarrassed about his animal than terrified of alien invaders. Vex stood frozen, his announcement interrupted by what he would later learn was called a dog. The crowd began talking again, louder now, no longer afraid. One child asked, "Mommy, is the alien going to play with Max?" Commander Vex, conqueror of worlds, had just been defeated by a domestic pet's enthusiasm. Within 6 hours of the Rio de Janeiro landing, Earth's response shocked Commander Vex more than anything he'd encountered. The humans didn't surrender. They didn't panic. They didn't even seem particularly worried. Instead, they went viral. "Commander, we're intercepting thousands of human communications," reported the intelligence officer, her voice bewildered. "They're not military channels, they're public broadcasts. Social media, they call it." The main view screen filled with human transmissions. Videos of the landing had been watched billions of times. Humans were making jokes. Creating cartoons. One particularly popular clip showed Vex's interrupted speech with humorous text overlaid, "When you're trying to conquer a planet but a good boy wants pets." "They're mocking us," Thorne said, incredulous. "Not just mocking," the intelligence officer continued. "They're analyzing us. Scientists are discussing our technology. Military strategists are assessing our capabilities. Civilians are comparing us to their fictional entertainment. And, Commander," she hesitated. "They've already identified 17 potential weaknesses in our armor design based on the footage." Vex pulled up the human internet, a chaotic, decentralized information network that seemed to function on controlled madness. Amid the jokes and memes, he found something that made his blood chill: serious analysis. Humans who called themselves military experts were discussing tactics. The armor shows heat signatures, infrared missiles would be effective. Another, the joints appear vulnerable, aim for mobility. A video titled, How to Survive Alien Invasion, a Practical Guide, had 50 million views. But what truly disturbed Vex was a transmission from human governments. They'd formed a unified response council within 4 hours, something the Empire usually prevented by sowing division. The message was simple. Commander Vex, we received your offer. Our answer is no. Please leave our planet peacefully, or we will defend ourselves. We don't want war, but we're very good at it. We've been practicing on each other for thousands of years. Practicing on each other, repeated Captain Thorne. What does that mean? The science officer pulled up human history files. Oh no. Oh, Commander, you need to see this. The screens filled with images from Earth's past. Humans fighting humans with increasing sophistication. Wooden clubs became metal swords, became explosive weapons, became atomic bombs. They'd fought wars that killed millions of their own kind, learned from each conflict, and developed military technology specifically designed to kill beings similar to themselves. They're predators, whispered the science officer. Not of other species, of each other. They evolved competing against the smartest, most adaptable species on their planet, themselves. Vex reviewed footage of human warfare. The tactics were brutal and creative. Humans fought in every environment: jungles, deserts, oceans, even underwater, and in their primitive aircraft. They used camouflage, ambush, psychological warfare. They'd weaponized everything from diseases to information. They're bluffing, Vex declared, though uncertainty crept into his voice. They have no orbital defenses. No energy weapons. No ship-to-ship capabilities. Launch the assault. 10,000 troops, full planetary subjugation protocol. As the invasion force prepared to deploy, a junior officer interrupted, Commander, we're receiving another transmission. It's strange. The view screen showed a middle-aged human male standing in what appeared to be a military command center. He wore a formal uniform and held papers in his hands. Commander Vex, the human said calmly, before you proceed, I want to share something. This is a partial list of species that tried to make Earth their territory before you. He began reading: saber-toothed cats, cave bears, giant eagles, crocodiles the size of your shuttle, mammoths, wolves, countless diseases and parasites, ice ages, volcanic eruptions, asteroid impacts, and about 10,000 years of humans fighting other humans. The man looked directly into the camera. Everything on this list failed to kill us. We're still here. We're very hard to get rid of, Commander. Very, very hard. This is your last chance to leave peacefully. The transmission ended. Vex stood silent for a long moment, watching the blue planet rotate below. Somewhere down there, billions of these fragile-looking creatures waited, descended from survivors of the deadliest world the galaxy had ever produced. Launch the invasion, he ordered, his voice less certain than before. 10,000 Krillian soldiers descended on Earth's major cities simultaneously, a show of overwhelming force that had broken the will of countless species. New York, London, Tokyo, Mumbai, Cairo, each metropolis would see the Empire's might firsthand. Commander Vex watched from orbit as dropships pierced the atmosphere, their shields glowing. The plan was simple: occupy strategic locations, disable military infrastructure, and await the inevitable surrender. It usually took less than a day. The first troops landed in New York's Central Park. Squad leader Torvin reported confidently, ground secured. Civilians fleeing. No resistance. Beginning advance toward. The transmission cut to panicked shouting. They're everywhere. How are they? Explosion sounds. Screaming. Above us. They're above us. They're using their own buildings as static. Similar reports flooded in from every landing site. In London, Krillian soldiers found themselves fighting in a maze of narrow streets where their size became a disadvantage. In Tokyo, humans had somehow evacuated civilians and prepared ambush points within 30 minutes. In Mumbai, the sheer chaos of millions of humans moving through the city created a confusion the Krillians couldn't penetrate. But it was the human military response that truly shocked Vex. Within 15 minutes of the invasion beginning, human aircraft filled the skies, primitive jet-powered machines that shouldn't have posed a threat. Except they didn't attack directly. Instead, they fired missiles that exploded into clouds of fine particles, disrupting Krillian sensors. They used electronic warfare that jammed communications. They employed tactics the Empire had never encountered because they'd never fought an enemy this creative with such limited technology. "Commander, we're taking casualties," reported Captain Thorne, his voice strained. Squad 7 in Cairo was lured into a building rigged with explosives. Squad 3 in Beijing is surrounded, humans are using the terrain, coming from sewers and rooftops. And in Moscow, he paused, checking data. In Moscow, civilian vehicles are ramming our troops. Civilian vehicles? Vex repeated. That's suicide. Yes, sir. They know it's suicide. They're doing it anyway. Vex watched tactical displays light up with threat indicators. The humans weren't fighting like any species he'd encountered. They weren't trying to win through superior technology or strength. They were adapting, learning his soldiers' patterns within minutes, exploiting every weakness. In Sao Paulo, a Krillian squad entered a warehouse chasing fleeing humans. The building collapsed on them, it had been rigged to fall. In Sydney, humans used sound weapons that did no damage but disoriented the soldiers long enough for conventional weapons to target weak points. In Jakarta, they flooded streets, using water to short out shields. "These tactics are insane," muttered Thorne. "They're sacrificing themselves to learn our vulnerabilities. Every death gives them data." The science officer pulled up an analysis. "Commander, human military doctrine apparently includes something called acceptable losses. They calculate how many of their own people they're willing to sacrifice to achieve objectives. She struggled for words. "It's ruthless." Vex remembered the human diplomat's warning, "We've been practicing on each other for thousands of years." A transmission came through from the human unified command, "Commander Vex, you've now been on Earth for 37 minutes. In that time, we've identified your armor's vulnerability to sustained high heat exposure, your communication frequency, and your tactical formation patterns. We're still collating more data. Every second you stay, we learn more. Want to continue this experiment?" The message was delivered with clinical calm, no anger, no fear. Just factual assessment. "Pull back Squad 9, Vex ordered suddenly. Regroup at the Paris landing site." As Squad 9 attempted to withdraw, they found the streets blocked by human vehicles. Not military vehicles, civilian cars, buses, trucks, deliberately crashed to create barriers. The humans had predicted the withdrawal route and cut it off in under 5 minutes. From orbit, Vex watched his supposedly invincible forces being dismantled not by superior firepower, but by creatures who fought smart, fought dirty, and fought with a level of stubborn determination that defied logic. One squad leader's final transmission summed it up: "They won't stop. We kill 10, and 20 more appear. We destroy their weapons, and they pick up rubble. They're not soldiers, they're everyone. The entire planet is fighting us." Vex stared at Earth, the death world that had evolved creatures so persistent, so adaptable, that even themselves couldn't kill them off completely. Commander Vex had one option left: orbital bombardment. From space, his fleet could turn human cities into glass. It violated every principle of conquest. You couldn't rule a dead planet, but at this point, it was about sending a message to the rest of the galaxy. No one defies the Krillian Empire. Target the largest population centers, Vex commanded. Fire on my mark. The weapons officer hesitated. Commander, there are billions of civilians down there. They're all combatants, Vex replied grimly. We've seen that. Every human is a potential soldier. Execute the order. Before the officer could comply, alarms shrieked across the bridge. Multiple launches detected from the surface, tactical called out. Tracking, 200, no, 500 missiles inbound. Impossible, Thorn protested. They don't have the technology to reach orbit with weapons. They're using their space rockets, the science officer reported, pulling up data. Civilian spacecraft retrofitted with warheads. They've also launched from submarines, aircraft, and mobile ground platforms. Commander, they've coordinated a simultaneous strike from 17 nations. The missiles weren't sophisticated by Krillian standards, but there were hundreds of them, coming from multiple angles, overwhelming point defenses. Several got through. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as explosions blossomed against its shields. Shields holding at 83%, reported the defensive officer. But if they maintain this rate of fire... They can't, Vex insisted. That was everything they had. Negative, Commander. We're detecting additional launches. They're using everything: military, civilian, experimental. One of these is tagged as museum piece. They're literally firing historical weapons at us. A new transmission came through. The same human diplomat from before, but this time his demeanor had changed. Behind him, Vex could see activity, people rushing with purpose, screens showing tactical data, the organized chaos of a war room. Commander Vex, you don't understand what you've done. You've united us. Do you know how rare that is? We spend most of our time fighting each other, but when something threatens all of us, the human smiled grimly. You've given every nation, every faction, every group on this planet a common enemy. That's a very dangerous thing to be. The transmission shifted, showing footage from Earth's surface. Factories that had been producing consumer goods were now churning out weapons. Humans working around the clock, barely sleeping. Children being evacuated while adults prepared defenses. Scientists sharing research across borders. Former enemies coordinating strikes. We're good at war, Commander, the diplomat continued. We've had thousands of years to perfect it. And the terrible truth is, he leaned closer to the camera. We're good at it because we enjoy solving the puzzle. Every war is a problem to be solved, and we get better each time. You're teaching us how to fight aliens now. Every ship you send down, every soldier, every tactic, you're showing us your weaknesses. You're training us. Vex felt cold understanding wash over him. The humans weren't trying to win immediately. They were learning. Every casualty was a lesson. Every failed defense revealed information. They were treating the invasion like their scientists treated experiments, methodically gathering data, testing hypotheses, adapting their approach. Sir, they've just launched another wave, Tactical reported. These ones are different, they're targeting our sensor arrays specifically. They're trying to blind us. How do they know where our sensors are? Demanded Thorn. They worked it out, the science officer said quietly. They've been studying our ships since we arrived. Building models. Running simulations. Commander, I'm seeing academic papers being published in real time analyzing our technology. They're crowdsourcing the invasion. Another alarm. Commander, we have multiple contacts approaching from lunar orbit. They're using their moon base as a launching point. They have a moon base? Vex felt reality slipping away from him. It's a research station, was a research station. They've apparently weaponized it in the last 6 hours. Vex stared at the planet below, the Deathworld that had bred these impossible creatures. They were outmatched in every way, weaker, slower, with inferior technology, but they had something the Krillian Empire had never encountered, the absolute refusal to accept defeat, combined with the intelligence to turn every disadvantage into data. "Commander, recommend immediate withdrawal to regroup," suggested Captain Thorne quietly. The words hung in the air. Withdraw. Retreat. Concepts that hadn't been part of Krillian vocabulary for 3,000 cycles. Commander Vex stood alone on the observation deck, watching Earth rotate beneath him. Behind him, the bridge crew prepared for withdrawal, quietly, efficiently, and with something Krillians rarely experienced: humility. The final casualty reports made for grim reading. 3,000 soldiers dead or missing. 12 dropships destroyed. 2 orbital cruisers damaged. And the humans had barely deployed their full military capacity yet. They were still ramping up. A transmission request came through. The same human diplomat, but this time Vex accepted it in his private quarters. "Commander Vex," the human began, and his tone was different now, not threatening, not mocking. "Tired, perhaps. I want to be clear about something. We didn't enjoy this. Thousands of my people died today. Thousands more are wounded. Entire neighborhoods are destroyed. This was a tragedy." "Then why?" Vex asked, genuine confusion in his voice. "Why fight so hard? We would have allowed you to live, to maintain your cultures. Subjugation isn't extinction." The human was quiet for a moment. "Because you asked us to kneel. Humans don't kneel well, Commander. It's not in our nature. We've spent our entire existence refusing to kneel, to predators, to disasters, to each other, to gods, to kings. Even when we should kneel, when it would be logical and safe, we don't. It's perhaps our greatest flaw and our greatest strength." Vex thought about every death world he'd conquered. Species that had evolved claws, armor, venom, size, physical advantages that made them formidable. But none had evolved what humans possessed: the psychological inability to accept defeat. "Your planet," Vex said slowly. "It's the deadliest world we've encountered. Not because of its predators or environment, but because of what it did to you. It forced you to become something we've never seen, survivors who turned suffering into strength." "Earth is a harsh teacher," the human agreed. "Everything here either adapts or dies. Our ancestors watched stronger, faster, more dangerous species go extinct while we survived. We learned that strength isn't about muscles or claws. It's about persistence. About looking at something impossible and trying anyway. About failing, learning, and trying again." The human paused, then added, "We have a saying, Commander: what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. Earth has been trying to kill us for 3 million years. We've gotten very, very strong." Vex made his decision. "We're withdrawing. Earth will be marked as a forbidden world, Class 13 Death World. The first in Krillian records. We'll inform the Galactic Council that your species is not to be disturbed." "We appreciate that," the human said. "And Commander? I know this feels like defeat for you. But I want you to understand something. In a few generations, humans will reach the stars properly. We're determined like that, we see space and we want to explore it. When we do, we'll remember this day. We'll remember that you chose to leave peacefully rather than escalate further. That matters." After the transmission ended, Captain Thorne entered the quarters. "The fleet is ready to depart, sir. But I have to ask, why are we really leaving? We could still win through attrition, orbital bombardment." Vex turned to face his captain. "Because they're not fighting to win, Thorne. They're fighting to learn. Every day we stay, they get better at killing us. Today it took them minutes to adapt to our tactics. Tomorrow it might take seconds. And eventually, he paused, looking back at Earth. Eventually they'd figure out how to reach us up here. And then they'd bring their war to us, to our colonies, to our home world. They'd hunt us across the galaxy with the same persistence they use for everything else. He pulled up an image he'd saved, one of thousands circulating on the human internet. It showed a human child holding a sign that read, "You messed with the wrong Deathworld." "We conquered species that evolved to kill," Vex continued. "But they evolved to survive. There's a difference. A predator stops when it's fed. A survivor never stops, because survival has no finish line." As the Krillian fleet jumped to faster-than-light speed, leaving Earth behind, Vex filed his final report. It would change galactic policy forever. Recommendation: avoid Earth at all costs. Indigenous species possesses no significant physical advantages. However, their planet has forged them into something more dangerous than any predator: survivors who treat impossibility as a challenge. They have weaponized hope itself. Do not engage. On Earth, humans watched the alien fleet disappear. They celebrated, mourned their dead, and then, because they were humans, they began preparing. Just in case. Because on a death world, you always assume something's coming to kill you next. And you make sure you're ready when it does.